And now, coming off of our conversation with Rob O'Donnell with regard to the law enforcement reaction to the shooting in Nashville, let's now talk about, sadly, the media's reaction to this shooting. Not quite as professional and not quite as deliberate. Joining us is the managing editor of hotair.com, our good friend Ed Morrissey. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing well, Larry. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, this is partly a media conversation, but also, sadly, even a political conversation with regard to elected officials and Democrat staffers who are acting questionably in light of the fact that we still have parents who are mourning the loss of their 3 8-year-old children. We've got the families of these three adults who were killed in the Nashville, Tennessee shooting. But I know you've written earlier today at Hot Air about a questionable tweet from high-ranking staff member of Governor Katie Hobbs, or no, not Katie Hobbs, excuse me, that's the Congresswoman. I do that all the time. Oh, no, it is Katie Hobbs. Katie Porter,
Yeah,
Katie Hobbs, Ed Morrissey. I keep getting them mixed up. But talk to me about what happened to the governor of Arizona's staff member here and what she put out.
this is the press secretary for the governor of Arizona. So this is a government official in her own right, and her name is Jocelyn Berry. And Jocelyn Berry, this is after the shooting had taken place. Put out a tweet that said, "This is how we deal with transphobes," and it's a shot of Jenna Rollins from I believe it's from the film Gloria, holding two pistols. And
Yeah,
basically saying, "Hey, we shoot transphobes around here." This is a governor's aide. This is a state official that is basically endorsing violence against people who dissent from the transgender uh the dictats of the transgender community. And
yeah,
I mean, this is in a state, Larry, and I mean, this is the point I make. This is in a state where 12 years ago, you had an insane person shoot, I think it was 11 people, six of them died. Gabby Gifford survived. There was a federal judge who died in that shooting because he was just insane, had nothing to do with politics. And yet, for years, the media covered this as somehow Sarah Palin being responsible for this because she had once had a map of the country that used bullseyes for congressional districts that her group was targeting in the midterm elections. I
right.
mean, the New York Times, as late as 2017, was running that idea that somehow Sarah Palin was the person who inspired this shooting, merely for having, was really just normal political imagery in
Yeah.
campaigns.
They were politically targeting those congressional districts. Obviously, there was never
Right.
even a suggestion of violence, but the media decided to make that the narrative.
And so now you have a state official that is actually endorsing the idea of using violence against people who oppose transgender policies. And Larry, I have to tell you, I had to go through an avalanche of media reactions to this, a full 8 reactions from the
Hey,
from Nash eight, four of which were, Fox News, Daily Mail,
right.
Washington Times, and the New York Post. But the Arizona Republic, to their credit, picked it up as an tacit endorsement of violence against political opponents, and
Right.
is trying to get an answer from Katie Hobbs's office as to what they're going to do with their press secretary. Their official top press secretary is the one who tweeted this out. It's been
Yeah.
deleted, but they're not responding to this. I mean, the New York Times, which Sarah Palin had to sue in 2017 to get them to retract the allegation that she was the inspiration for that 2011 shooting, they haven't run a single story on this. Neither has the Washington Post. Neither has most of the American media.
Yeah.
And so you're right. This has become a media story as well as a politics story. But the problem is that the media are political actors. And so
Yeah.
almost any time now you're talking about a political story, it is almost de facto a media story. And this is a great example of why that is.
Yeah, and it's such a great comparison to the Tucson shooting, or recently, I remember, I believe it may have been Joe DeGeneva, who was a legal consultant for President Trump, who had said something about heads on pikes, I think was the term.
Yes.
Obviously, a rhetorical flourish, but suddenly he's calling for the beheading of political, but no, he's not. You can say we want their heads on pikes for rhetorical purposes. This is literally in response to what they're calling transphobia, and you see a picture, an image of a person shooting guns moments after an actual shooting took place. Ed, to call it a double standard, I think, is underselling the point.
Well, it's not a double standard. This is a didactic. The media
Yeah.
has become a political actor in this. And so what happens is that when they use when the left uses violent rhetoric, the story is how the right reacts to it.
Yes,
When the right uses any sort of imagery that could be violent in any way, shape, or form, the story is the fascist Republicans, the fascist conservatives. And
that's
this
right.
is a I mean, we have friends who have made this into memes. Jim Treacher, David Burge, these guys have made it into memes, right?
Yeah,
I think it was David Burge that said the role of the press is to cover stories that harm Democrats with a pillow until it stops moving. And so, and that's apparently with what is going on in this case as
100%.
well.
There's another way the media was covering this story. Yesterday afternoon, I saw it, two headlines that really stuck out to me. NBC News, their angle on the story was how this was affecting the transgender community in Nashville. That they're worried that there will be violent repercussions against this community. When of course there's no hint of that, but that was the angle NBC News took. Daily Mail, which usually I'm actually pretty impressed with how they cover American politics, they had a story focusing on the Christian parents of this murderer and how they had, quote unquote, not accepted her. Well, last I checked, she was actually living in their house. She was paying
Right.
for their bills. She was still caring for her at the age of 28. That's some pretty good acceptance from loving parents who are obviously challenged by the sexual nature of their daughter's life. But to suggest there that it was their non acceptance that may have brought about this episode, it's again a really inappropriate and unfortunate way to cover this tragedy.
It really is. I mean, the issue here isn't acceptance; it's celebration. The parents didn't celebrate Audrey Hale's choice, and that's the reason why people are saying, "Well, they rejected her." They didn't throw her out of the house. She was living at home. She was 28 years old. She had mental problems that they were aware of, and were trying to get her help for those mental problems. And clearly, the parents here could have taken some other steps. We can discuss that maybe at some other time. But the issue
Mhm.
here isn't that they rejected their daughter. That's absurd. And you're right. I'm a little surprised about the Daily Mail. The thing about the first thing that you mentioned is that the coverage at NBC News about the transgender community being afraid of violent repercussions is it's coming at the very same time that transgender activists are calling for a day of vengeance. And this was actually something that they were setting up prior to the shooting, but they're
Yes.
still planning to go forward with it. So, complete with the violent imagery, they've got, so-called assault rifles on the logo and that sort of thing, and calling for a day of vengeance. And not only are you not seeing coverage of that, you're seeing people on Twitter who have been bounced off of Twitter briefly for just saying vengeance
Right.
in their tweets. And
For
so, yeah, I
using the
mean,
word vengeance. That's right. Sean Davis at the Federalist and I believe Michael Knowles over at Daily
yes.
Wire
Oh,
were both bounced off because yeah, it is. It's again, it's an unfortunate way. And you said something there, Ed Morrissey, that I think is so important. We could have that conversation about the appropriate role of parents in a situation like this at the proper time. This is not the proper time, and at some point,
no.
some recognition of respect and decorum needs to enter into the public conversation again. But until that day, we're glad we've got Ed Morrissey over at Hot Air. Thank you, sir. It's always great to talk with you.
Thanks, Larry.
Never enough time to talk to Ed Morrissey. We'll have him back for an extended period. There's more to come. Keep it here on O'Connor Tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel.